Hello friends, and welcome to the bear paw block. So from the fabrics that you received in the mail, you're going to cut your fabrics accordingly. So your gold floral will be cut into 4 2¼ inch squares, 2 5½ inch squares, and 4 2 by 5¾ inch rectangles. Our green fabrics are going to be cut into 2 5½ inch squares, and then 1 2 inch square. And then your persimmons will be cut into 4 4 inch squares. Okay, so what I like to do is I'm going to line up, because we've got quite a few pieces with this block, as I'm just lining mine up as per the letter that they correspond to here on the pattern. So we've got A, B, C, D, E, and F. On our gold floral B squares, we are going to draw a diagonal line on the wrong side of the fabric on both diagonals. So we're going to have corner to corner and corner to corner. And then we will line it up with a green D fabric, and we will sew 1/4 inch on both sides of our diagonal lines. So as you can see, I did a 1/4 inch seam on both sides of those drawn diagonal lines. Then what you're going to do is you're going to cut your square vertically and horizontally, and then you will cut on the drawn line. We're going to take our 16 half square triangles and we are going to square these up to 2 1/4 inches. So I'm utilizing my ruler here, and we want to make sure that we are lining up that center line to a 45-degree angle on your ruler, and then trim up accordingly. Okay, so you see here I've lined up my 45-degree angle line. Very minimal to trim off here, but there we go. And now I will flip it. Get that center lined up, but we want it at 2 1/4, and trim up all 4 sides accordingly. Okay, so before I move on to step 3, I am actually going to just roughly lay out our block here. So we've got the E in the middle, C, rectangles coming off of that, like so. We've got our F block here, like so. And then our, this is the A right here in the corners, like so. And then our little bear paws, the claws of the bear paw. So I just want to lay them like so, just so that I can try to avoid sewing them together incorrectly. So now I'm going to take our 2 half square triangles, and I'm going to sew these together with a 1/4 inch seam, like so. And then that will form a rectangle, and then I will sew that rectangle to our F square. Once you've sewn those two half square triangles together and then you've sewn them onto your F block, you're going to press them. When I sewed my two half square triangles together, I did decide to press this seam open just because it was getting a little bit bulky when I pressed it to one side. So I chose to just press that open, and I like actually how it's finished now that I've sewn these two together and pressed it down. It's created a lot less bulk on that seam. So there you go. Okay, now that we have our two half square triangles and the F sewn together, we're going to move to this portion here. So we are going to sew our two half square triangles. Again, put them together, right sides together, 1/4 inch seam, and then I will sew them to the little post here. So once those are together, then I will put this post there and do a 1/4 inch seam. And again, I'm going to do the same pressing as I did with these guys. I will, once I've sewn this seam, I'll press that seam open to create less bulk. Okay, so now we're going to take our two units here and we are going to sew them right sides together. I'm going to pin along this edge here to make sure that everything lines up and that our seam here lines up nicely. And yeah, scant 1/4 inch seam, and then we will have our bear paw. And then once we do that, we will repeat this for the other three to create 4 of these bear paw blocks. Okay, so now that we've completed our 4 bear paw units, we are going to now attach these in rows. So we'll sew these 3 together with the scant 1/4 inch. So these 3 together, scant 1/4 inch, these 3 together, scant 1/4 inch, and then we will sew together our rows to complete our block. So now that we've sewn together our 3 rows, when we put these 3 together, there's no mention of this in the instructions, but what I wanted you to notice was what I decided to do was I pressed my seams on my top and bottom row. I pressed this center seam towards the middle, and then for the center row I pressed my seams outwards. So what that's going to allow me to do is just to nest these seams right here so that the points match up really nicely. Regardless, I'm going to pin this up all along this edge and do a scant 1/4 inch seam, and then come to this side, right sides together, pin, and do a nice scant 1/4 inch seam, and then we will be done. And there you have your bear paw block. And you're going to, when you're finished, trim it up to 12.5 inches squared. Again, as with our other blocks, I noticed I literally had nothing to square up. I was essentially just trimming off the little hairs off the end. So do make certain that you are best pressing your fabric before you start cutting and piecing, and make sure you're using a scant 1/4 inch seam so that you are finishing up at 12.5 inches squared. Thanks very much. Hope you had fun. Hello friends, and welcome to the Flying Geese block. For this block, you're going to take the fabrics that you've received and you're going to cut them down. Your plum will be cut into 8 3 7/8 inch squares, and your floral print will be cut into 2 7 1/4 inch squares. Okay, so with your fabric A's, you are going to take them, and on the wrong side of the fabric, you are going to mark with your iron off friction pen. You're going to mark a line, a diagonal line from corner to corner, like so. And then repeat with all 8 squares. With our fabric B, our floral print, we're going to take 2 of our B squares and we are going to place one in the upper corner with our diagonal drawn line pointing towards the center. And then we are going to take another square and we're going to place it in the opposite corner. Again, with the diagonal drawn line pointing towards the center. So the drawn line is going to be our guide, and we're going to sew 1/4 inch on both sides of the drawn line. So 1/4 inch and then 1/4 inch. I've pinned down my squares just because I want them to stay in place, and we're sewing on the diagonal, so this can tend to get distorted and stretched out. So put a few pins in there just to keep everything in place. So there you can see we've done a scant 1/4 inch on both sides of the drawn line. And now we are going to cut directly on the diagonal drawn line. Now we're going to bring this over to the ironing board and we are going to press these over. So for both pieces, you're going to set your seam. Set your seam. And then press it open. Now that we've pressed our pieces open, we're going to take our two of our squares, and again, with the line pointing towards the center, we're going to place this in the corner, like so, and like so. And again, I'm going to pin these up, and then I will sew a scant 1/4 inch on each side of the drawn line. So now that we've sewn our scant 1/4 inch on both sides of that drawn line, we're going to use the drawn line as our cutting line. And just like that, we have 4 flying geese blocks. Let's get these pressed open. Okay, we've pressed our 4 flying geese open, and now we are going to make sure and square these up to 3.5 inches by 6.5 inches. I'm going to use my slotted ruler because it's quick and easy to do, but you can use a regular ruler or however you choose. Again, 3.5 by 6.5. Again, as you can see, these squares are coming up. They are sewing up exactly at 3.5 by 6.5. And as I've said before, that's with me doing a scant 1/4 inch, best pressing my fabrics before I start cutting. So best press first, scant 1/4 inch, and pressing as you sew. And they are coming up literally exactly at 3.5 by 6.5. So please make sure you follow those steps so that you are not winding up with your flying geese being smaller than that. So we've pressed open our flying geese, and now we have 4 flying geese. You're going to take your remaining fabric and you're going to repeat the process, so we will end up with 8 flying geese blocks. So now we're going to take our 8 flying geese units, and in sets of 2, we're going to sew these together. So again, we want our geese to be flying in the same direction, and then we will put them right sides together and pin them up on this side and a scant 1/4 inch seam. So we've sewn our scant 1/4 inch seam and ta-da! There's your flying geese block. Now we're going to repeat this process 3 more times and then press them open. Okay, we've pressed our block open. I've decided, and it's not in the instructions, but I've chosen to press this center seam open just because where the little point is here, this seam is kind of bulky, so I've chosen to press that open. And now we're going to take our 4, and as per your diagram in the pattern, we are going to lay out our flying geese, like so. So again, you want all your geese flying in a circle. And another way to check as well is that you have this square here in the center. Okay, so now we are simply going to right sides together. So those 2 together, right sides together, pin, and sew these together with a scant 1/4 inch. Just note when you're pinning these 2 pieces together, be extra careful and double check that the point here is completely lining up on this side as well, because we want our geese, the little points, to be lining up. So just make sure that you're pinning it really nicely along this seam so that when it comes here to the center, the finished product will be lining up perfectly. Okay, we've sewn these together, and again, that seam I've chosen to press it open because right here in this little center portion, you're getting a lot of bulk in there. So I've just pressed that seam open. And now our last step is to take this, right sides together, pin it nicely in place, and scant 1/4 inch seam. And there you have your flying geese block. I hope you had fun with this. I really enjoyed it. This was the first time I've actually done flying geese with this technique, and I love it because you're making 4 at a time, which is fantastic. And I found that they came out really accurately. You can see here that none of the little points have been chopped off, which sometimes happens with some techniques. So hope you enjoyed this, and we'll see you again for the next one. Take care.